Welcome to the Love Coach in My Pocket podcast with your host, Whitney Kobrin, a dating and relationship expert and love coach. But I wasn't always an expert. I battled through years of heartbreak before I finally cracked the code on love, and now I'm here to share that hard-earned wisdom with you. You're in for a treat, getting the guidance you never learned growing up. Whether you're here for practical dating tips, expert advice, or deep talks on healing, this podcast is your go-to resource for lasting love. Get ready to feel empowered, inspired, and ready for love. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Love Coach in My Pocket podcast. Today we have a really special guest with us, and we are going to be talking about some deep issues that come up in our romantic relationships. So I want to introduce my guest, Adele Currin. Adele and I have a lot in common, but where I mostly help individuals who are looking for love or are in new relationships that are still figuring things out, Adele works with couples who are really seeking that deep, authentic, healthy, fulfilling relationship. Adele believes that everyone can develop the skills they need to have the kind of love that they really deserve. As a divorced mom and a registered nurse with multiple coaching and hypnotherapy certifications, Adele's approach is holistic, compassionate, and grounded in real-life tangible skills. She consistently stretches herself via her own practices of meditation, rigorous exercise, and working with her own coaches. And she loves bringing what she learns to her clients. So welcome, Adele. It's so nice to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Whitney.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about how you got into being a relationship coach.
I get that question a lot. Well, it started with really my interests in health and wellness. I was first, to go way, way back, of course, a nurse, which you mentioned, but then I became a health coach. And as I was working as a health coach, I realized that although I love the health and wellness stuff, what I really wanted to do was to help people through something that I myself had struggled with. Because I figured that would be a lot more meaningful and I would be able to relate to people better. And that's been the case. So, the thing that's been the hardest for me in my whole life have been my relationships. So, I've been through divorce and I learned so much through that experience that then I really wanted to share with other people. So that's how I kind of, wound up with that specific niche.
Yeah, and I said before that we have a lot in common, and I think that everything you just said about wanting to teach people all that you learned through the hardship that you went through, I can very much relate to that. And for me, it was the dating piece. It was finding someone. It was getting into that relationship. I've actually never been through a divorce because my husband passed away, so that was a very different experience. Yeah. And when I work with people who are going through divorce, you're one of those people that I will refer people to really get, because there's a lot to it, right?
Oh, there's so much. And you know what I love, and this is like kind of tends to be my philosophy about everything in life, is there's so much opportunity there to really learn and grow from it, whatever the tough experience is, right? Like you've had tough experiences I haven't had. I've had one you haven't had. And so I really have learned from it. And I try to help my clients see that too. It can be a little difficult in the moment for sure to see what an opportunity it really is.
Yeah. So I'm so excited to talk about these opportunities. When we had talked before the show, you mentioned that you have this framework, and we decided that today's episode will be about that question that we ask ourselves when we're in a relationship or marriage. Should I stay or should I go? Right? It's such a tough question. So tell me a little bit about this framework. Where do you start?
Well, you mean where would I start with a client?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you and I talked about this, but one of the very first things I do with clients who are in this conundrum, right, is I tell them to actually take that question off the table for the time being.
Mm.
It's almost impossible to do. I've been there, and it's so hard. But I find that people tend to drive themselves pretty much crazy trying to figure it out in their own mind, right? So one of the very first things I do is say, if we were to work together, I want you to take this question off the table, and let's do this work. And as you go through the work, the answer is going to become clear. But it's, I found that starting with myself, but with other people I've worked with, it's such a painful place to be. And there's this constant kind of mental ping pong back and forth, and it's incredibly painful, and people can stay stuck in this place for years. And people will tend to think, we do this about everything, not just about our relationships, but we tend to think that we're going to be able to somehow figure it out by thinking about it. It just never happens. So that's where we begin.
Yeah. So what do we do other than thinking about it?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So and this leads right into, I told you there are kind of three big questions I like to ask, I think are important for people to ask themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So the first question to ask yourself if you're in this place that I said, is, have I done my own work? So
have I done my own work?
Yeah, have I done my own work? And I can tell you a bit about what I mean by that, because there are lots of kinds of work you can do, and there's certain work that I think is a lot more effective than other kinds of work. But really, that's, rather than continuing to think about it, going for help to the right person or people is really a much better way to go, because it gets you out of your own head, and it gets you to open your mind to other perspectives and to start to do things differently.
So let's define the work, because I remember when I was in a very toxic relationship when I was younger. Right. And I remember I continuously justified the way things were going because I was always hearing relationships take work. and this relationship was toxic. We were fighting all the time. He was a jerk. I found out later, he had undiagnosed mental illnesses.
Right.
And I just kept thinking, oh, well, this is normal. Relationships take work. And now I see that there's a big difference between what we think is work when we don't really know, and what is the real work. And one of the things that I base all of my work on now is mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual or energetic. And so in my opinion, the work is, the mental work, the physical work of the embodiment. So I want to hear from you. What do you think the work is, and what is not the work?
Yeah, such a good question. And I, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go back to what you said for a minute about people saying relationships are hard work. Because I think that's really important, right? We hear that a lot, and it's true. We have to work on our relationships, and relationships tend to bring things up in us that show us those are things we need to work on. And a relationship does not need to be a place of struggle, and I'll put it this way: a relationship needs to be making you better, not worse, right? And so I find, I don't like to give advice to people, but I do, to the extent that I give advice, I tend to think that if you're in a situation that's making you really unhappy, and you've been in that situation for a while, like if you're dating, let's say it's maybe only a month, but if you're married, maybe it would be longer than that. I think you're generally better off leaving it than continuing to suffer in it and to be in an unhealthy, toxic situation, even if you haven't done your work. Okay, that's my opinion, right? I think it's unhealthy to remain stuck in a bad situation. So I'm just throwing that out there. But so even people haven't done the work, I think if they're in a really bad situation, they're better off just leaving.
Okay.
But
so what is the work?
having said that, so if someone came to me, I'd always say, do your own work first. Okay. So the very first thing I think of when I talk about doing your work is meaning work that focuses on you as an individual. Okay. And maybe this is where my work with couples is a little different, because if I work with a couple, I break the two people apart and work with each individual. Because a relationship is built on the foundation of two individual people. And so if the individual people aren't functioning well, if they're not healthy, the relationship's not going to be either. So when I say your work, I mean focused on you. So let's say that in your example, you're dating somebody, and I don't remember everything you said, but like he had some mental health issues or whatever. Typically, what often happens, I guess I should say, in therapy or couples counseling is there's a lot of focus on the other person. I go to my counselor and I'm complaining endlessly about the fact that this guy's drinking too much, or he's cheating, or whatever he's doing. And that isn't work. That's not the work. That's complaining. and it doesn't, you might get some awareness of the fact that like maybe you're in a bad situation, but it doesn't bring you any closer to having a happy, healthy life for yourself. So when I say work, I mean focusing on you. And so then we could talk more about what does that look like, but that's like the first thing. You need to find a therapist or counselor, coach, or whatever, who is going to help you identify your own stuff and work through that, and not let you complain endlessly about the other person.
Can you give an example of what that stuff might be?
Yeah, your own stuff. Yeah, so yeah, I can definitely give some examples. I would like just to pull back for just a second. I'd just like to say that people can get really angry when I mention this, but here's how I like to think about it. We always have some responsibility for what's going on in our relationship. Okay. Even if the other person is a narcissist, even if the other person is an addict, even, no matter what. And so the way I was trained, I actually got a training in something called conscious uncoupling. We're taught to look at our responsibility, even if it's only 3%. Okay. So example, and I'm going to go with something extreme, because I think it makes the point even more clear. So the extreme example is, and I'm not an expert on narcissism, but let's just say you're dating someone who's narcissistic, okay, and they're horrible. My 3% responsibility may be that I'm lying to myself that maybe this person's going to change, and therefore I stay. Maybe my 3% is simply that I am continuing to date this person. Okay. So that's my responsibility. My responsibility is what I can control. I can leave, right? I have a choice there. I can't change this other person into someone who's a different person. So, I think that's really a simple kind of extreme example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it reminds me when I had an epiphany years ago. I had been in relationships where my partner was very controlling and would give me the silent treatment and was just really treating me unfairly. And we go through these stages of development, of growth, I think. And I had a stage where I realized I don't deserve this. He's mistreating me. This is not okay. But then it was actually years later that I realized my part. And I had this big epiphany all at once that hit me that said, I put up with it. I allowed it. I facilitated it. And now I know, and I teach people, everything that you tolerate is basically like you're saying, this is great. This is good. This is exactly what I want. Keep doing this. Yeah. Just by simply tolerating it and allowing it.
Tolerating it, so, or going along with it. I mean, I can give you in my relationship was something much less extreme, but it was bothering me a lot. Which is, the person I was in a long relationship with would insist on, whenever we'd have date night, would insist on doing whatever he wanted to do, right? And in my mind, the things he wanted to do were really boring. I think he enjoyed them, but I didn't like doing what he wanted to do. And I would get so angry that he would never do anything I wanted to do, never even consider it, and be really stubborn about it. But my part in it was I went along with it, and people go along with these things for good reasons, right? Like you're afraid that the relationship is going to end if you don't. A lot of times that's the motivation. So for me, I thought, well, I've got to go on date night or otherwise like this relationship's going to fall apart. So it's like that's a big part of the work. We have to learn how to face those fears that come up when we stop that thing we're doing. So to not go along with it would mean, oh my God, maybe the relationship's going to end. And then the big fear is then I'll be alone. Maybe I'll never meet anyone else. So as you're contemplate, if you start seeing your side of things, it brings up all these big fears, which are really the big issues underneath why we do the things we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's circle back to step one being, have I done my own work? Yeah. So what else would you say about this step?
About this step. So, it's just when you're doing this step, I would say the main thing that I have to remind people of over and over and over again is bring the focus back to me. But where is my focus? Bring the focus back to me. Okay. And so it's also becoming really aware of, if you're not, and I wasn't one of these people, becoming really aware of the way you feel, of the way you're thinking, and of your actions. Okay. And so I often have to start with clients really in a really simple, basic way of just becoming aware of what the heck I'm actually feeling. So with my clients, I start with a lot of awareness, and then I help them with how to actually manage the thoughts and feelings that come up. Because and you could call this emotional regulation,
consciousness.
Yeah. Well, it starts with awareness, right? So you have to be aware of something before you know what to do with it. But then you have to I give people an actual tool that teaches them how to manage their own emotions. Because here's the thing, if we don't learn how to manage our emotions ourselves and our thoughts, we put that on our partner. We go to them for helping us manage something that's really our responsibility. So that's really important. Not that your partner can't help you, right? But your primary responsibility for managing that is yours. So I really help people with that, and how to get some of those basic needs met. So that you're not constantly expecting someone else who, in a lot of cases, is unable to help you, to help you learn how to do that on your own.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So what is the second step?
So the second question I like to ask is, has my partner, my husband, wife, whatever you want to call that person, have they done their work? Okay, because a lot of times what comes up is the person who comes in for coaching, obviously, is someone who is open and usually willing to work on themselves. And I often get the question, okay, well, I'm doing all this and my partner isn't doing anything and they're still the same, So at some point, as we grow and get healthier, we do our own work. A relationship isn't going to work anymore if the other person is refusing to meet you in the middle, refusing to go to therapy, refusing to change. So, and that's a really painful realization for people, right? Like, because you can work on yourself and work on yourself and work on yourself, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have much of a relationship with someone who isn't stepping up to the plate.
Yeah. I find that often people need to get really clear first on what they need and what they want and be able to communicate it clearly and set those boundaries. And then things become very clear whether your partner can meet your needs and respect your boundaries, because we have to teach people how to treat us. And so often when we do that, we'll find that the partner does start to improve, or we find, okay, I have a definite answer now. I've been very clear about what I want, what I need. I've said it in the right way. I've done my work. And if they're still not willing to step up or make changes, if they can't meet your needs, then they can't meet your needs. And it's important to face that reality, right?
Yeah, it becomes really clear. That's why when people come to me, and sometimes it's a couple or sometimes it's an individual, and the individual says, hey, my husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend isn't interested. What should I do? I was like, do your own work, because when you do your own work, then things start to become clear, right? So if that, I mean, and this second part is simple. It's like a really easy question. It's not like, it's just, okay, well, I've done my work, and now if they've not done theirs or they're not willing, then you have an answer.
Yeah. I heard a long time ago somebody propose a new way of marrying, that it's a contract for 7 years, that at the end of 7 years, you decide if you renew it or not.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's always stuck with me. I heard that probably decades ago. And it's really hard to just, it can be really limiting for people to feel really stuck in their marriage. And I know multiple people personally who are in really unhappy, toxic marriages, and they just won't leave. They'll never leave. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like, it does, having done this work, it really does make me think about the whole concept of marriage. Not about having a commitment to a person, not about working with someone, not about, family. It's not about that for me. It really makes me think about the way we look at marriage is something that is automatically forever, regardless of what's happening.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue, right? It's like, I think it can give people the excuse to be really lazy.
Yeah, right. It's like if you know your partner's never going to leave you, then why do you have to keep up with your own work or change anything? And people do change and people evolve. And I think that even if people have a great connection in the beginning, that it is possible that people can, outgrow one another and
Oh, sure.
not be happy together anymore. And I think that marriage, I'm a romantic. I love love, and I love the idea of people getting married and staying together forever, and those couples on the dance floor that are 80s and in gray hair and just so cute. But it's just, life's not always perfect, and it's not always ideal. And as much as we want the ideal, deep spiritual connection that keeps us together and that we grow together, sometimes I think we have to face the reality that it just, might not be that for everyone and every relationship and every marriage. And it's an opportunity, no matter what, for us to grow if we're willing to look at it in the right way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the opportunity can be while people are still in the relationship too, right? Because I'm sure, as you know, a relationship inevitably brings things up. Yes. And you're like, oh, okay. So instead of, it seems like there's a couple of extremes, right? Just going, okay, well, I guess this is how it is. This is marriage, and it's supposed to be hard, and I guess we'll be roommates now. That's one extreme, right? Or the other extreme is just like getting divorced, right? There's an opportunity there to work through stuff and to work through things both together and on your own, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I can think back to one of my past relationships where I didn't really do a lot of the inner work, and I just stayed in it because I stayed in it and felt like it was the only option, and I didn't know how to make things better, so I would just brush things under the rug, and resentment grew.
Yep.
And the relationship I'm in now, and it's been almost 6 years, we never brush anything under the rug, ever. Big, small, whatever. And it's so amazing. I've never felt this before, like being in a relationship that has no underlying resentment. There's no rolling our eyes at each other. It's like a real positive interaction. Like I would choose to marry him pretty much every day. And we've gone through some hard times, and we've gone through some, almost, we've gone through some things that have almost torn us apart. And every couple will go through things that will almost tear them apart. But those are the biggest opportunities, I think, to explore and go deeper.
You can end up, closer as a result. Right? Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, these things that we don't even want to look at within ourselves are seen by another person, and vice versa, right? Our shadow starts to come into the light.
I mean, and so often too, one thing I was going to say at the beginning is that so often the problems we have with our relationships, it's so easy. And even though I thought I was this self-aware person and had done all this work, I did it too. It's so easy to blame the other person for what they're not doing or what they are doing, right? So often the problems in our relationships are because of our own stuff. And if we don't take the opportunity when a problem arises to look at our own stuff and to work through it, then, it's a lost opportunity, right?
Yeah. And I imagine it's so important to work with a coach during that time, because we're so used to complaining about the other person. We're so used to thinking we know exactly what's going on. And it's so hard to keep coming back to, what am I missing about myself? What am I not doing?
It's so important. And it's so easy to slip back into that. I'm thinking of some people I'm working with right now. I'm like, we're there. People tend to do good work and progress, and then it's human nature too, right? You progress and you regress. And
it's also helpful to work with a coach. I'm thinking about a client that I have now who is, she's been with someone that is a covert narcissist. And these covert narcissists are tricky, because when you first meet them, they seem amazing. They are life of the party. Everybody likes them. They're successful. And it takes quite a while for their deeper self to really come out. And so a lot of people are limited too by their financial situation. This is one of the things that it's like the ideal versus reality, right? There's all these trad wives that are promoting the traditional wife way of being, which in many ways is so beautiful and such a great partnership. But the reason that that's not as common these days is because if the relationship splits up, the woman doesn't have any financial security. She doesn't have an education. She doesn't have a job. And so I think a lot of people, when they're asking, should I stay or should I go? It's also the practical things, and it's, can I afford to live on my own? And am I willing to downsize from this lifestyle to the kind of lifestyle that I can afford on my own? Have you had experiences with that, or have you?
Always. I mean, there are always practical concerns, right? The two main ones are the kids and the money, right?
Yeah.
How is this going to impact my kids? How is this going to impact my financial situation? And it's real. I mean, it's real, right? I mean, obviously we have to have money to live. We all care about our kids and don't want something bad to happen to them. I would say in a way, like the kid thing is probably the easier one to address in a way. Because that can be, it's like there again, whether it's the money or the kids, it comes back to what can I control? Okay. I can't control the way the other person's going to react, but I can be as stable and healthy as I can for my kids.
Yes.
And often people realize I don't want my kids to see this kind of relationship. Now, the money thing, I mean, that's really tangible. And I mean, I actually have to say, without going into too many details, I was lucky in that way that when my significant relationship ended, I I knew that I would be okay financially. And I've had people say, I don't think you should tell people to split up because not everybody's going to be okay financially. Well, first of all, I would never advise anyone to do anything one way or another. And
because you let them come to their own decisions, you're saying, right? Not because you don't want to give advice, but because everybody's situation is so unique and their feelings and their needs and their situation needs to be,
right.
So
yes. I mean, I would never like tell anyone what to do unless there was, unless it was really abusive.
Right.
But the other thing is that like, I think sometimes it's truly a matter of, I can't afford it. A lot of times it's a story people have made.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about finding the possibility. It's like, okay, maybe you can't afford it the way you're looking at it now, but what if this, what if that?
What if, yeah. And you know what? There's always a way to earn money, and even if you haven't been, you can start, I know people who've gone back to school while they're still married so they can support themselves, and it's not easy. And I guess one question to ask yourself, I didn't put this in our list, was like, okay, so let's say 20 years go by, and you're picturing yourself by the time, let's say you're 40, you're picturing yourself when you're 60. Are you going to regret, having stayed there and sort of like, just staying stuck? Or are you going to, would the 60-year-old you be proud of you?
I just got goosebumps, and I always get goosebumps when on profound truths like that.
Yeah.
So this has been awesome. Our time. Let's. There were 3 questions. So tell me the third question.
Oh, the third question was, and this is similar, and I kind of touched on it already, but someone asked me this question, and it moved me to tears and gave me such clarity that I wanted to include it. If your child came to you in, let's say, 20 years, and they told you that they were having the exact kind of relationship you have right now, what would your advice be to your child? And when someone asked me that, I was like, holy, I don't know if I can say that word on here. And so it's like, why would you do something, advise yourself something that you wouldn't advise your child? You love your children, you want the best for them. And that's the way we really want to treat ourselves too.
Wow. Thank you so much, Adele, for coming on, for sharing your wisdom. So the 3 questions when you're thinking, should I stay or should I go? Have I done my own work? That's the internal work. It's the awareness. It's the growth. It's the tools and strategies for getting through the hardships in life as well, and so much more. Question 2, has my partner done their work? And number 3, if my child came to me 20 years from now saying that they're in the exact same kind of relationship that I'm in, what would I tell my child? I love that. Thank you so much. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of Love Coach in My Pocket, where we talk about love, dating, relationships, healing, and all sorts of topics related to these. Don't forget also to download the Love Coach in My Pocket app from the App Store for tons of free resources to support you on your journey.